Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and today I'm going to share everything that I've learned about you. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodgers fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me today for the podcast. I am Raymond, as always, your host. And man, it's getting chilly out there. It's winter now, at least if you're in the northern hemispheres. It's getting chilly, and it's not fun. It's starting to slow down as far as like photography goes because it's getting cold outside. However, today, the day that we're speaking right now, I have an engagement session for a couple that wanted to do something in the fall, but it just never worked out for them time-wise. So we're going to do it today, where the high is going to be 27 degrees. So it's going to be a challenge. I went ahead and bought plenty of hand warmers so that they aren't too chilly. So, okay, today I really want to talk about everything that I've learned about you, okay? Because you are the listeners of this podcast. You are the ones who keep me going. Maybe I would reach out to these people, these guests that I have on, and say, hey, I'm a photographer. Can we just chat about photography? And maybe some of them would do it, but without the podcast, I think that a lot of them probably wouldn't. And it's not a bad thing. I truly enjoy interviewing the guests that we have on, and even more so, I like doing it for you. I know how much value they can bring, and I know personally from listening to other podcasts how much, even in an hour-long interview, maybe not on my podcast, but in an hour-long interview of another podcast, I might get one sentence or phrase or tip that is helpful to me, and it'll change everything, right? Even if it's just a mindset change, there's still change there, and that is positive. And that's worth the hour of time that I listen to podcasts. And that's what I'm hoping to give you. I really hope that you are getting value out of this podcast, because if you're not, well, then just turn it off right now, because if you're not getting anything, I really don't want you to waste your time. I'd rather have you go out there and find something that you can learn from, that you understand is more of your style of learning. Like for me, I'm just not a fan of, this sounds so stupid, I don't get into books as much as I do through videos or other podcasts. My mind tends to wander a lot, and I can get through a book, sure, but the amount of excitement that I get, I just don't get it unless I'm watching either a video and I can see the other person's excitement and how they're doing something, or listening to podcasts and listening about the mindset and how they approach certain aspects of photography. So if that's you, if you enjoy listening to podcasts, and if that's how you learn, then thank you so much for joining me today, because I just want to say thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart. In fact, I really want to share a review that we got in iTunes, because it really means the world to me. So today's review comes from Mr. Dingman, which is the coolest. I really hope that that's your last name, and I really hope that you're a teacher, because your students would absolutely love you. That's the coolest name ever. Okay, so Mr. Dingman says, I found this podcast when I was just a little seedling, and it has helped me so much in understanding the fundamentals of photography and a little bit of the business of photography. Thank you so much. I look forward to every episode. Holy cow, man. First of all, Mr. Dingman, you're awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave a review in iTunes. That's really is such a huge motivator for me. Seeing your results and what you feel about the podcast, it really makes me feel good, and it motivates me to keep going. And second of all, I'm so glad that you found the podcast while you were just a little seedling, and that it has helped you understand the fundamentals of photography, because without strong fundamentals, you don't have a base to stand on. And fundamentals aren't what camera you should buy. It's not, hey, should I shoot Canon or should I shoot Nikon? Because that doesn't matter. Like a fundamental should be evergreen. It should always apply. And 100 years ago, people weren't asking, "Are you shooting Canon or Nikon?" They were asking about different films. They were asking compositional questions. They were asking how to become a better photographer instead of just focusing on the gear. And I'm glad that you found that in this podcast, because that's really what I try to. I don't want to say drill into your head, because it makes it sound like I have an agenda, but that's what I really want to. That's what I really want you to get out of this podcast. And whatever that may be, to tell you the truth. If you think that you're finding fundamentals of photography in this podcast, then I'm grateful for you, and thank you again, Mr. Dingman, for leaving that incredible 5-star review in iTunes. And if you're listening right now, holy cow, I cannot tell you how much I would truly appreciate if you left the podcast a rating or review in iTunes or whatever podcast app or delivery system that you are listening to right now. If you're on iTunes, you can do it right within the podcast app if you're on your phone, which makes it super easy. If you're on your computer, which I'd have to look at the analytics, but I don't think a lot of people listening to the podcast on their computer, unless they're editing, which is also cool. Again, it would just really mean the world to me. Just a few sentences. Just let me know how you found the podcast and why you enjoy listening to it. And that's it. That's it, guys. So, like I said earlier, I really want to share in this episode everything that I've learned about you. Okay, and learning about you is super important for me, because I have been shooting for a long time, and sometimes I get tunnel vision, right? I think all of these things that I know, everybody else has to know. So that's why I interview other people on the podcast instead of just me talking to. Well, actually, I'm just going to be talking to you this whole time today. Anyway, that's why I wanted to start bringing on people to interview and ask them questions on the podcast, because I get tunnel vision and I don't know what I'm missing out on sometimes, I guess. So when I asked, okay, so sorry, I should probably just edit that out. Maybe I won't. Anyway, I wanted you to get a lot of value out of this podcast, right? And that's why I interview guests, so that you can get different points of view. So once I started doing that, and once I started receiving emails from people saying, "Hey, thank you for this episode. Like, this was a great episode," or the thing that your guest shared really changed my mind on how I was doing this, or it's really made it a whole lot easier for me to do X, Y, or Z. So I thought, you know what, I really need to bring these people together, because I don't want people to just listen to an episode, really enjoy it, and then just fall off. I really want people to learn and grow, and I want to see your growth as well. So that's why I started the Facebook group. It's a community of other beginner photographers, not even all just beginner photographers, just oftentimes past guests, and some people who are even in business as photographers, some people who are more advanced than just starting out with a camera, but there's a lot of just beginners. And the group is great because there's no ego, there's no awkwardness, there's no, oh, I'm better than you with this and that. It's just genuinely people trying to help each other, and that's exactly what I wanted. And a place where you can share a photo and get constructive criticism. Ask, how can this photo be better? Or what am I missing when I was taking this photo? And I think that is so important. So the first thing that I want to share, the first thing that I've learned about you as a listener, and this is all through the podcast Facebook group. So if you want me to learn something about you, then go ahead and join the group as well over at facebook.com, obviously, and then just search for Beginner Photography Podcast up at the top, and you should find the group right away. So the first thing that I've learned about you is that it is so clear, and I've been saying this for a long time, but you have been the proof. It is so clear that you don't need quote-unquote good gear or professional gear to take a great photo. If you are part of the group, you will see photos that people have taken just with their iPhones or their Android phones that are great photos. Because what makes a great photo? I mean, we could go on this question all day, but there needs to be some form of emotion. There needs to be good light. Actually, all the time there doesn't need to be good light. Good light definitely helps. That makes a great photo. And composition always takes the photo to the next level. That's what always, every single time, makes a good photo really good, is good composition. And all of that can be done with a phone these days. It's not all about lens choices or ISO and all that stuff. Although those things can help and they can enhance photos, they don't automatically make for a good photo. And it's just been so clear that you can get out there and you can just take amazing work with just your phone. All you have to do is just know the phone's limitations and play to its strengths. That's all that you have to do. And you would be surprised at the quality of photos that you can get out of just such a small phone. And I've, for a few years, I'll kind of go off on a tangent here. This sounds stupid. For a few years, I have been not worried so much about the camera and focusing really on the photo itself. And I've been doing that all the way, I think, since like the iPhone 4. So I was an Android user like from the beginning, and then once the iPhone 4 came out, I was like, okay, high def video, this seems pretty cool. HDR mode it had. I think I'm going to go ahead and try this thing out. So I got the iPhone 4 and I loved it. And right away, I just started looking at photography different, and I would use it as my primary source of photos of my everyday life. And I think that you should as well, because you always have it on you no matter what. Even though I carry around like a point and shoot, a little Fuji X70 with me, the iPhone is still like my go-to if I'm out and I, obviously don't have my camera. So take those photos, it uploads to PhotoStream, and you can, on a Mac at least, and over time you can just look at the photos that you've taken and you can see that you've gotten better, and you can just see the quality of your work enhance. So it really doesn't, you don't have to spend a ton of money on a good camera to be able to take a good photo. You can really do it with a cheap cell phone. So the second thing that I have learned in the group is where you should be paying attention to your information. I guess that sounded really vague there. Oh, okay, so I'll give you an example. Some photographers, like professional photographers, I think Lindsay Adler is one. I'm going to try to get her on the show. Anyway, Lindsay Adler is one photographer who shoots in aperture priority. And what that means, if you don't know what aperture priority is, it means that you tell your camera what aperture you want your lens to be at, whether it be an f2, an f2.8. If you have just the stock lens that came with your camera, it's probably going to be an f3.5. Excuse me. And then your camera makes the other decisions. It chooses your shutter speed and it chooses your shutter speed. You have to manually set your ISO unless you just put it on auto ISO, but that doesn't matter about aperture priority. So it chooses your shutter speed. So that's one less thing that you have to think about. And some people have said like, oh, well, if a professional shoots an aperture priority, then there's no reason for me to learn manual. And first of all, that's not true. You should definitely know how to shoot manual, and I guarantee you that Lindsay Adler also knows how to shoot manual. But there's a difference between choosing to shoot. Well, I don't know why that was so hard to say. There's a difference between choosing to shoot in aperture priority and not knowing how to shoot in manual. So she has to shoot in aperture priority. And the difference is that in manual, you learn what goes into taking a photo. You learn how aperture affects your photo. You learn how shutter speed affects your photo. You learn how ISO affects your photo. And when you put all those things together and you know what it takes to take a great photo, like you're now a more competent photographer. Like that's great. But her choosing to shoot in aperture priority, I guarantee, is just because she has found a way that has fit her shooting style to now capture photos quicker for her. Okay? For me, that wouldn't work. For her, it does work. But that doesn't mean that that is the right decision. that you have to shoot, that you can just like forego learning manual because a professional only shoots an aperture priority. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So just understanding why people do things is important. Okay? Why do some photographers use flash? Why do some photographers not use flash? Just because a photographer isn't using flash doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need a flash in that situation. Maybe it just means that they aren't comfortable with shooting flash, which I've said before, and I'll say it again. If you're a professional photographer, I think might be irresponsible to not know how to manipulate light using a flash. So just take whatever you hear on this podcast and anywhere with a grain of salt. Seriously. Question everything that is said to you, because I'll tell you, I've had people on the show. Well, most recently, I had a guest come on the show that I interviewed, and they were talking about the business of photography, and what they said was that beginners are bringing the entire industry down because they're charging so little. And I thought that was so fundamentally wrong that I didn't put out the episode. For more reasons than that. But just the fact that was shared was so not for what I'm trying to teach you. Because I think that it is just absolutely wrong. And I'm not going to get into why he thought that, because it doesn't really matter. What's important is that you really need to learn from everything that you hear, and you need to question everything that you hear and ask yourself if it's right for you. And are beginners bringing the industry down? No, not at all. I think that they're making the industry better. And that's why I talk to you all the time. So the number 2 thing that I learned from you is that damn, why is this so hard to put into words? I'm just not good with words at all. Is that you take everything maybe a little bit too literally, or you take it as fact just because it came from somebody with more authority than you. Stop doing that. Okay. I hope that was more motivational than it was like a stab at. Anyway, okay. Number 3. The number 3 thing that I have learned about you as beginners is that you put a lot of unnecessary pressure on yourself to take a good photo. Seriously, a while back there was a group discussion about an album that was being built, and in it there was a photo that really didn't say anything to me. It didn't sing, from the heavens. It wasn't an exceptional moment, I suppose. But the photo was technically sound. The exposure was there. The depth of field was perfect. And the framing, the composition was also really well. However, the looks on, I think it was of children, the looks on the children's face was just not into it. They were just kind of there. And I thought for the rest of the book, like all the photos that I saw in the rest of the album, it just didn't fit the photo, or it didn't fit the rest of the album. And what it came down to was that the photographer said, yeah, but like technically it's a perfect photo. It's a great photo. And sure, it was, but it wasn't a good photo, right? All the technicals were there. So it's kind of like this. You might want a Ferrari, right? From a engineering standpoint, it's beautiful. It's masterpiece. Everything that, it's handcrafted. Everything was meticulously placed in that car to make sure that it is the best possible car, okay? But if you have several children, if you commute a lot to work, if you don't live in a very rural area or have access to a racetrack, it doesn't matter. Who cares about that car? If you got kids, you're not going to be fitting in a Ferrari. If you live like in a very populated area and you're driving in traffic, who cares that your car can go 200 miles an hour or whatever? Because you're going 13 right now, stuck behind a minivan, which right now is a better car than yours because it has kids and it has groceries in the back and it gets better gas mileage than your Ferrari. So what I'm saying is that just because a photo is technically perfect, it doesn't mean that you have to share it. It doesn't mean that it's the right photo. I've put plenty of photos in my wedding albums that are just not good technically, right? The ISO was way too high. The photo was underexposed. It's a little bit blurry, but the expression on whoever's face it is, or what it is that I'm capturing, was great, and it's memorable, and it brings up an emotion, and that's why I put it in there. So I don't want you to think that your work is garbage because it's not technically perfect, because a lot of the times it's better than what you think it is. Okay, the fourth thing that I have learned about you is that you are all great photographers. So a lot of people love digital photography because you don't need it just brings down the barrier to entry, right? Suddenly you can take more than just 24 or 36 photos at a time, like a roll of film, and then have to go to a store and spend $10 to develop those few photos. Now you can snap away and experiment and try new things without worrying about the back end cost, right? So just being alive and being a human with a cell phone, with any sort of competent camera on it, this day and age has elevated the quality of photography. Just, I don't know, through osmosis or just like through everyday practice. I'm not even sure. Like, you're not even trying to be better photographers, and people are just becoming better photographers. And I look at the photos that you guys are sharing, knowing that, oh, you've only had this camera for 3 weeks, right? Or a month, or not very long. Or it's been in a closet for years and you just picked it up and you started taking photos again. And I look at these photos that you are sharing and I think, holy cow, when I was at that point in my photography journey, my photos were garbage. Garbage. The worst. They're seriously not good. And you guys are just sharing photos that consistently blow me away for how long shooting, how long you've been practicing photography. And I want you guys to keep that up, because practice, this sounds so cheesy, practice makes perfect. It really does. So the more that you do something, the better that you're going to get. And just know that right now you have such a leg up on what others had who came before you, that it makes your journey into photography so much easier. And easier should mean more enjoyable, okay? You're now taking better photos than ever before. It's now easier than ever before to take these photos and then share these photos. So take this time, appreciate that, and just enjoy photography for what it is, okay? Don't put too much stress on yourself about not being able to grow fast enough, or compare yourself to these other photographers who have been doing it for, 10 plus years, or have an editing style that is, objectively better than yours. Don't worry about that stuff. Have fun with it now, because just know that you're better than, it's like that phrase, I guess it's not a phrase, but right now, the end of 2017. Geez, I just dated this podcast. If you're listening to this in 2049 and Skynet has taken over, well, just try to think of this as a better time, okay? In 2017, even though you hear about protests, people being, hurt by cops, or like vicious killings or murders, or just like lots of bad things, right? Lots of bad things that you hear on TV. Know this. This is a fact. It is the safest time to be alive in the history of humanity. It has never been safer to be alive than it is right now. Think about it. I'll take an example from my life personally. The Hatfields and the McCoys. If you haven't heard of the Hatfields and the McCoys, it was a famous feud hundreds of years ago that happened after one of the McCoys stole a Hatfield's pig. There was murders. The families feuded, so like they shot at each other. They shot and killed other members of the family over a pig. Today's day and age, if you hear about that, that's crazy. That's like, whoa! like a dude killed a dude, and usually it's like an isolated incident. It's not like an entire family of people is killing another family of people. But that just, I don't want to say is how it was back then, but it was more common back then than it is today. It is safer to be alive today than it has ever been in the past. Okay? Where was I going with that? Oh, photographers are better now today than they ever have been before in the past. And take that momentum. Wow, that was a really roundabout way of getting here. Take that momentum and ride it, okay? Go with it. Enjoy the journey that you're on, and just know that you're in a better spot than you could have been if you were born 30 years ago or 40 years ago or even 10 years ago, you know? Okay. Lastly, the last thing that I've learned about you, the listener of the Beginner Photography Podcast, is that you don't back up your photos as much as you should. Seriously, this is a problem. You need to be backing up your photos. You need to be, and when I say backing up your photos, what I mean is that you need to be protecting your photos. Okay? People don't have photo albums as much as they did 30 years ago. People just have hard drives full of photos. And hard drives, guys, I've said this before, it is not if they will fail. It is when they will fail. And if you only have one copy of your photos on your phone and you drop your phone in a toilet, boom, all those photos are gone. Like, you've heard of people doing that. If you only have one copy of your photos on your computer and that hard drive fails, I take that back. When that hard drive fails, all those photos are gone. You need to be figuring out how you can protect your photos for the future, because like these are the memories that you're saving now for your grandchildren, for the future, because who knows how important your photos could be years from now. Excuse me. So please start protecting your photos. And whether that means using Google Photos, which you can download to your computer, Mac, PC, I believe Linux, maybe not, I don't know. Anyway, use that. It'll back up all your photos on your computer and it will save them to Google's servers, right? And then periodically you're going to get updates from Google Photos of like, hey, let's just rediscover this day from 3 years ago, right? And then you can look at the photos and it's just kind of like a road to nostalgia. It's like, oh yeah, oh man, I remember that. We had so much fun that day at the zoo or whatever. And that's important. It brings up those memories. It makes you feel good about the time that you spent. It shows you how far along you've come in taking photos. But if you don't want to upload your photos to a company who is investing in machine learning and artificial intelligence, I get it, right? For security reasons, whatever. I still do it. I trust it, for now at least. Anyway, if you don't want to do that, then you need an external hard drive, and you need something that is going to protect your photos. And there's a saying when it comes to storage: if you have one copy, you have no copies. If you have two copies, you only have one copy. And if you have one copy, you have no copies. So having an external hard drive might be okay for now, but it's not a long-term solution, okay? You really need to be having... I really believe that there should be multiple locations where your photos are stored, because that is going to increase the likelihood of your photos being safe. So for me, I use a Drobo, and I know that you've heard me talk about this on the podcast before. I use a Drobo, and what a Drobo is it looks like, it's about the size of a toaster, I guess, except inside it fits 5 hard drives. And of those 5 hard drives, it shows up on my computer just as one hard drive. And when I put a photo on my Drobo on the computer, like if I just drag and drop a photo onto it, the Drobo itself, without me having to do anything, creates several different locations for that photo to stay within those 5 different hard drives. That probably sounded a little more complicated than what it needed to be, but what it means is that if, without me having to do anything, if one of the hard drives die in the Drobo, and it will, I'm just waiting for that day, it will die. When one of those hard drives die, all I have to do is I take it out, the dead hard drive, I throw it, I recycle it responsibly, and then I put in a brand new hard drive, and the Drobo itself rebuilds all of the data that was in that hard drive that is now dead, so that I haven't lost a single piece of information. And better than that, the Drobo will protect against 2 hard drives failing without losing any data. Think about that. Think about that. Your hard drive in your computer will die. The hard drive in my Drobo will die. And it will still protect those photos, no matter what. So, it's a bit of an investment. However, it's going to last a long, long time. And for me, it's worth it. I create a lot of photos. As a photographer, you create a lot of photos. So protecting them is essential. And that is what the Drobo does for me. That is how you can protect your photos as well. If you want to know more about it, I seriously cannot speak highly of this thing enough. I use it. I've used it for years. I use it every day in my personal life. I use it every day in my business. It's one of the most valuable pieces of technology that I own, next to my camera and then next to my computer, I suppose. If you're interested in it, check it out, just look at it. Just look at it on Amazon or go to drobo.com. It's really changed the way that I view my photos, because now suddenly I'm not worried about always losing my photos, and I can focus my energy on taking better photos and spending more time editing and just becoming a better photographer, which is important. So that's it. Those are the 5 things that I've learned about you as beginners in my relatively short time of podcasting and being a host and being an ear to listen to your questions or your concerns or your growth, right? That's what I love. I love hearing about your wins as a photographer. I love hearing how much or where you've taken photography and what it has done for you and your family. And I really hope that you continue to grow. And I really hope, above everything else, that I can still be there on your journey to help you along, to get you to a place to where you're happy with your photography, and just take it wherever you want to take it. You don't have to feel pressured of, oh, I have a camera, I'm good at it, now I have to start making money. You don't have to feel that way if you don't want to, honestly. And if you really want to start a business and become the world's best, fashion photographer, the highest paid photographer, whatever it is, I really hope that this podcast can still give you enough value to set you off on the right foot. So I can't do any of this without you. So for those of you who are joining me, thank you so much for every person who has left a review for the podcast. Thank you so much. For every person who has sent me an email, thank you so much. Thank you. So guys, that is all that I have today. I want you to get out there and I want you to shoot and I want you to have fun. I want you guys to stay safe. And now I want you to start sharing your photos. Seriously, start sharing your photos. And that's it. I love you all and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.